afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociological research method, in today's lecture we are going to discuss on analyzing qualitative data. So qualitative research is very significant in social science, especially sociology, and over the recent years it has become a dominant form of collection of data and analysis, especially in sociology. So here we are going to discuss the qualitative research method in terms of its growth, historical evolution, its characteristics, and the various types of technique for collecting and analyzing data. So qualitative research relies heavily on methods like participant observation, a long established approach in the social science where the researcher immerses themselves in the group being studied to produce a detailed holistic account. Participant observation involves sustained interaction and immersion within a community or organization. Popularized in anthropology by Bronislaw Malinowski, who encouraged researchers to abandon detached observation from the veranda and engage directly with people. So Malinowski is an anthropologist who kind of was against the idea that you could do study of society, especially an anthropological study, from the, say, it's sitting in your study room or from the library, and that is why he's saying not from the veranda of your residence. Rather, you need to go to the community which you are studying, observe the everyday life, and that is what was termed as participant observation. The researcher becomes one among the respondents or the society where he or she is studying, and in kind of have a detailed observation of every minute things that is going on in that community. And another term which is used in the qualitative research for participant observation is basically ethnography. Ethnography is kind of becoming very popular in anthropology and sociology, and it's a term which has been borrowed from an anthropology, meaning a descriptive picture of a group's way of life. And this picture is actually the picture from the eyes of the respondent or the community that the researcher is studying. From anthropology, ethnography has started being used in a very dominant way in qualitative research. Sociologists have employed participant observation in classical studies, including these are some of the classical studies using participant observation, and the first is quite a very popular and a classical example of detailed participant observation, that is the William Footwhite's study of the street corner society. Here the researchers spent time with the street corner and made a distinction between the street corner boys and the college boy. Now the street corner boys were generally from the poor economic background, and they would be found in the streets kind of spending time idling, versus the college going boy. And the research was kind of giving this idea, rejecting the idea that this street corner boys are unorganized, they have a lack of goal in life, and so on. A similar study was done by Hilbert Ganz in 1962, where he investigated the Italian American community. Now this was a study of a community where there was a kind of urban upheaval project, and the idea was that there is a large scale transformations taking place at the village level, but the scholar argued that there was not kind of a overhauling of the cultural life, but there was a formation of a subculture. Similarly, there are a study of Dalton's who examines the world of manager, where the managers kind of not necessarily follow the strict rules, but they kind of adopt lot of unofficial ways of handling. And we also have the study of Royce in 1916 and Lupton in 1963 on industrial workers. Now these are some of the classical examples where the researcher has used participant observation. Now, if we look into the historical background, we know that it is not a recent development. It is not something that has emerged in the 20th century or 21st century, but it has a long tradition. developed much before its significant rise in popularity during the 1960s. It was there, the scholars were using, mostly anthropologists were using participant observation and other forms of qualitative research, but it was kind of hidden or subsided because sociology as a discipline, and we go back to the first few lecture, we know that it emerged with a positivist outcome dimension where the focus was in terms of developing a science of society and the emphasis was on quantitative research. Therefore, qualitative kind of lacked that weightage. Now, after 1960s, we see that intellectual roots of qualitative research, including influences like symbolic interactionism, predates its widespread recognition within the social sciences. Now, symbolic interactionism and other intellectual currents associated with qualitative research emerged prior to qualitative methods being widely seen as a major force. Increasingly disillusionment, now we kind of see the evolution of it. We know there is a history of the evolution of qualitative research. It has not emerged certainly, but there is a kind of a long period through which it has grown and nurtured. Now, why is there a requirement for qualitative research? And one of the reason is that there was a lot of disillusionment with the researchers in terms of kind of following quantitative research. Because not all kinds of social life can be captured through numbers. So, philosophers of science such as T.S. Kuhn encouraged more in-depth self-reflection about the nature of scientific inquiry, inspiring researchers to look beyond number and statistics. So, from late 1960, we also have phenomenology, this kind of where the emphasis was to understand human experience from the perspective of those being studied, further challenging the dominance of quantitative method. Now, we know how it has emerged, we can understand why is the requirement of qualitative research. Now, let us understand what are the core aim of qualitative research. And we know that there are many synonymous terms exist. They all refer to the same core approach, that is to study social life by describing and analyzing human culture and behavior from the viewpoint of people involved. So, whether we say qualitative research, we say participant observation, or we say ethnography, the core aim of this method is to understand, or to rather describe, it is more descriptive, and the everyday nuance of the culture, the behavior from the viewpoint of the people involved. So, it is not the researcher's own interpretation of the community or the universe that he or she is studying, but it is being explained from the perspective of the people involved. This perspective distinguishes qualitative research from quantitative approaches, which focuses more on external measurement and detached analysis. While participant observation is the most closely associated method with qualitative research, it is not the only one. The other major method mentioned is unstructured interviewing. Now, the researcher provides minimal guidance and allows considerable latitude for interviewees. Unstructured interviews are used for participant observer conduct at least a modicum of this type of interviewing. Some qualitative research uses it more or less exclusively. The aims are quite different from the familiar survey approach. So, here we need to differentiate between unstructured interview and a survey. Now, an unstructured interview can be a part of the participant observation ethnography, or it could be the only method through which data is being collected. So, you do not have a set of questions identified in advance just as you have it in a survey. You kind of ask questions are associated with the core idea of the research. So, some qualitative researcher use an interview schedule. And what is an interview schedule? It is a list of questions or topics. So you just have open-ended questions. So these are just a kind of a guidance to the researcher when he or she goes to the field, so that you kind of are very close to the objective of your research. But however, many researchers operate with loose collections of them themes they want to cover. Interview has a lot of freedom in both cases, and in variations in between. The subject is given much freer rein than a typical survey interview. Here, the highlight is to kind of differentiate between unstructured interviews in qualitative research and structured survey interview, which is typically in a quantitative research. And as I already said, the most important difference is that in a qualitative research and unstructured interview, you don't have a set of questions, and in a survey which is more in a quantitative use, you have close-ended questions. Most of the time it could be yes or no, or kind of more in terms of finding out the numbers, say finding out your caste or finding out your gender. So these will then say that 10 out of 20 respondents were female, or 10 out of 20 respondents belong to a particular caste. So it's closed. Now, another importance of the unstructured interview is rambling. While rambling in interview is typically seen as a distraction in survey research, in qualitative unstructured interview, it is valued for potentially revealing important aspect of interview's perspective and concern. So, the another difference between unstructured interview and survey is control. In survey research, maintain strict control over the interview process. They have a kind of fixed timeline and a fixed set of questions, fixed number of respondent. So it's kind of controlled analysis, data collection. While interview schedules do focus discussing and manipulate topic flow. So there is no fixed time, there is no fixed numbers in terms of how many respondents you are going to interview or discuss, and there is no strict flow of information. They could be kind of going back to the topic or coming flow. There could be something extra being discussed which is not listed down in the schedule. So it's kind of more freedom to the researcher. Now, qualitative interviewers, by contrast, may deliberate relinquish control align for open, organic conversation. The another difference between unstructured interview and survey is in terms of terminology. So, the use of terms like interviewee or client instead of subject signals a more egalitarian, less hierarchical relation, emphasizing that interviewees are more than passive recipient of questions. So, in a quantitative research, there is a hierarchy between the interviewer and the interviewee. So, you kind of have like you are supposed to answer this, and the researcher is kind of in a higher dominant position. In qualitative research, it's kind of giving more space to the interviewee as well, and therefore the term subject is used for them. So, it's more egalitarian. The next difference between unstructured interview and survey is in terms of multiple sessions. In one session, qualitative research is unable to collect the required data. So, it allows for follow-up interview, revisiting area not covered previously, whereas survey interviews are generally limited to single session. Now, one difference between the two is also in terms of the respondents. Surveys are generally used for large scale study. So, you are supposed to do survey of 100 respondents. Now, you can't try to redo it again, whereas qualitative research is more limited to a particular community where you kind of visited to collect data, and you come back and you feel that there are certain aspect that has been not covered. So, you go back to your field and kind of revisit, you do a review or you do a follow up, and therefore, you can in qualitative research you could have multiple session with the respondent. Now, researcher versus interviewee's perspective is another reason to differentiate between survey and unstructured interview. Survey interviews focus on gathering information crucial to the researcher, viewing digression as disruptions. By contrast, Unstructured qualitative interviews value unpredictability and spontaneity for the insights they provide into the interviewee's unique worldwide and concern. So, as already stated, that it's more egalitarian. So, here the focus is not the researcher. It's not just because it's going to fulfill the researcher's objective. It's kind of a two-way. It's also trying to understand the problem to kind of provide a solution to the problem that is being studied. So, it is the kind of a more sharing of the situation and the problems that is being faced. So, unstructured format is another area where we differentiate between qualitative and quantitative. Now, the unstructured format prioritizing understanding the participant and their experiences, the perspective of those being investigated over rigid adherence to predetermined question. Now, as a researcher, if I have not gone to the field, I would be framing a question on the basis of my own understanding of the social problem, and which is a part of a kind of a very generalized questions that we ask when we go for a survey. In contrast, in qualitative research, because the questions are not predetermined, there is a possibility of kind of changing the questions, bringing in new perspective when you are in the field, because through the interaction of the researcher with the respondents, new directions, new highlights or new factors come into notice, and that is the advantage of unstructured format. When the format is unstructured, the interviewing is also unstructured. It's not necessary that you fix a time and you kind of give it, it could be in terms of, you are part of that society, you are kind of doing an activity, while doing it you are discussing, you are just observing. So, it's even the interviewing is kind of reflecting the multifaceted approach which is taken by the researcher. Now, in qualitative research, we see there are a variety of data collections method. Researchers seldom rely on a single data collection method, but instead draw on multiple techniques to enrich understanding and corroborate findings. Participant observers often use unstructured interviews, examine documents, and may also conduct structured interviews or postal questionnaires. This methodological diversity allows insight or leads from one source to be checked or expanded by the others, increasing the reliability and the depth of the research. For example, Woods, a study conducted in 1979 and 1986, used postal questionnaire and follow-up interview to support his analysis of subject choice process among students and parents, supplementing his participant observation. The use of interview and questionnaire expand the scope and richness of participants' observation study. Qualitative researchers often prefer verbatim quotation from interviews over quantitative coding, feeling the latter diminishes the richness and context-specific nature of qualitative findings. There is a general unease with qualitative research regarding quantification of interview transcript, since qualitative methods are associated with intellectual tradition that prioritize narrative, context, and subjective meanings. Even in pure participant observation, there is significant variety in researchers' activity, as demonstrated in Gann's reflection on his suburban community research. In summary, participant observation in qualitative research is inherently flexible and multi-method, aiming to address complex realities by integrating various techniques to generate a nuanced, well-rounded understanding of social phenomena. Participant observation is a highly flexible and varied research method rather than a single uniform technique. Participant observation involves a diverse range of activities and data collection styles, which is considered one of its main strengths. Unlike survey or experiment research, which are used in quantitative research methods, tend to follow more standardized and uniform procedures, participant observation adapts to different context and research needs. Due to this variability, scholars often prefer broader terms like ethnography or field research to describe the full set of data collection practices used by participant observer. Participant observation is then more specifically used to describe the observational aspect conducted by ethnographer or field researcher. This semantic distinctions helps clarify discussions about qualitative research method and will be applied consistently in further treatments of the research method topics. In short, participant observation is part of a wider, adaptable approach in qualitative research, often encompassed under terms like ethnography or field research, highlighting its rich variety and contextual flexibility. The experts highlight the qualitative research with participant observation as a key method is a long established traditional predating its popularity surge in the 1960s. Participant observation involves researchers immersing themselves among people studied, using diverse data gathering techniques, including unstructured interviews, document examination, and these methods are used to develop in-depth understanding, unlike the more structured, controlled approaches typical of survey research or quantitative research. Qualitative research grew partly as a response to dissatisfaction with quantitative methods, inspired by philosophers like T.S. Kuhn and phenomenology, which emphasized understanding social life from the participant's perspective. Unstructured interviews often accompany participants' observation, allow for flexible, open ended conversation where rambling can reveal important insight, contrasting with the rigid focus of survey interviews. Now, participant observation is not a uniform method, but it embraces a variety of observational styles and complementary techniques like questionnaire, structured interview, providing richer corroborated data. Scholars often use broader terms like ethnography or field research to capture this multiplicity of approaches, reserving participant observation for the more purely observational component. So, it would be many a time if we say participant observation, it's not actually meaning to a method, it's kind of a technique of data collection. So, it's qualitative method, or we can use say field method or ethnography, within which the techniques are participant observation, unstructured interview, content analysis, structured interview, questionnaires. See, these are the kind of tools which we use to collect data for qualitative research. So, in all, qualitative research is characterized by its commitment to exploring social realities from the viewpoint of research participants through adaptable, multi-layered method rather than standardized researcher controlled procedures. Now, we also have the history method. So, the life history method is another form of qualitative research approach that involves reconstructing the lives of individuals to understand the experiences and social processes over time. It relies on varied data sources such as diaries, autobiography, and other personal documents that may already exist or be solicited from the participants. When solicited, it takes the form of an extended, unstructured interview where the researcher encourages the participant to reflect in detail on their life story and the changes they have undergone. This process is often protracted and in-depth, allowing rich insight into the individual, social and personal experiences over time. For example, one of the most well-known application of this method is Lewis' 1961 study of Sanchez family, which has explored their life experience living in the Mexican slum, illustrating the depth and contextual richness life histories can provide. In a sense, the life history method offers qualitative researchers a powerful tool to capture detailed contextual life narratives that reveal social realities from a temporal perspective. Another method of qualitative research is group discussion. Group discussion is increasingly popular qualitative research method that can be seen as an unstructured interview involving multiple participants rather than just one. They are typically loosely structured, guided by key topics and questions, but allowing flexibility for participants to interact and explore issues. An example of group discussion is Griffin's 1985. There are two work, one produced in 1985, and these work is a study of young women's transition from school to work, where group discussions complemented observations and unstructured interview. Group discussions have certain advantage as it provides richer, more dynamic data through group interaction and dialogue. So, they as kind of we discuss the problem, we capture collective contrast perspective, and then there is a nuance analysis of the data to arrive at the understanding or of the social issue that is being explored. Now, we have tried to understand the historical evolution, the characteristic, the variable ways in data collection and the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. For reference, this lecture has been prepared on the basis of reading Alan Bryman. The name of the book is Quantity and Quality in Social Research. Chapter 2 of the book is discussing quantitative research, and chapter 3 discusses qualitative research. So, it is advised to read this book to have a better understanding of the lecture. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.